Hey, before we jump in, I want to give you a quick word about the partner that's making this summer series possible, and that's NextGrad. If you're in higher ed marketing, you already know the challenge. Students are getting bombarded with college messages every single day, and most of it just blends together. NextGrad takes a different approach. Instead of fighting for the attention online, they put your institution's message right inside the high school, the place where students actually are day in and day out. They're in more than 2,500 schools across North America, which means your future students might be walking past a Next screen right now. Hey, I've been following NextGrad for several years, and I love what they're doing. I think it's extremely creative. I've actually been able to work on some of the creative with my clients to get in front of the students, and it's making a big difference. And I got to say, I'm a big fan of these folks. If you want to be the institution they remember when it's time to decide, go check them out right now at nextgrad.com. NextGrad, where students see you first. Hey, welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast. I'm Bart Kaler. Hey, today I've got a friend, Dr. James Steen. He's the Vice President of Enrollment Management and Marketing at Houston Christian University, where he has led enrollment for nearly 20 years. As a self-described recovering admissions counselor, James started as a campus tour guide at Baylor University, spent 13 years rising through Baylor's admissions ranks, and has served as senior associate consultant with R&L, Ruffalo Noel Levitz for nearly 2 decades alongside his campus role. Under his leadership at HCU, their freshman enrollment has grown from 268 in the fall of 2006 to record-setting classes today. In the fall of 2025, university posted the strongest enrollment growth in its history, with nearly 4,600 students, almost 4,700, all in one of the most competitive college markets in the country. Today, we're talking about how HCU shows up in front of students early and often. Let's get into the show. Hey, James, I'm so excited to have you here. I know we recently saw each other this week, but it's always good to be back on the podcast. But before we get started, I just want to pass along some condolences. Recently, your president, Robert Sloan Jr., passed away suddenly the last couple of weeks. So again, just sorry for your loss. And maybe you can say a word about Dr. Sloan and what he meant in your life.
So I've literally spent my entire career working for Robert Sloan, and not only was he a friend and a mentor, but he was a transformative college president. And so I have definitely worked with and learned from the best. So we are very, very much we're doing fine. We're going to move forward as an institution, but we are missing our friend and our colleague Robert Sloan dearly.
Yeah. Well, so sorry for your loss, and sorry for Christian higher education too. That's for just higher education in general, I should say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming back. I know I'm going to start passing out jackets for people who are like return and multi-return visitors, kind of like what Saturday Night Live does.
Yeah, the SNL sketch or whatever.
That's right. But one thing we always start off with, and I'm curious what your answer this time will be, is what's something interesting or surprising you've learned recently that maybe the audience will find helpful or useful or even fun?
Well, with the whole integration of AI, I think that's one of the things that we're all still trying to figure out, Bart. And we need more Bart Kaler webinars to help us know what we don't know, right? Maybe that should be the title of a book, no pun intended. But I think we're in the process of trying to figure out what this looks like, and it's probably easier herding cats, but we're trying new things, we're doing new things, and I think if you're not willing to be flexible and try new things, one of your great points at the conference you spoke at as our keynoter this week was that you not only have to relearn some things, but you've got to unlearn some things. Yeah. And so I think for all of us, maybe us old timers at our age, I think that's right. Great advice, and it's something I hope to continue to do as well.
That's great. I love that. I know, speaking of being old timers, I know you've often called yourself a recovering admissions counselor. It's probably been a few years, a hot minute since you've been an admissions counselor, but I know you started at Baylor as a tour guide, but you never really left the field. What hooked you and what has kept you in higher ed all these years?
Yeah. So, when you get into something like, higher education. For me, it was never going to be something that I was going to do for my entire career until you kind of look in the rearview mirror for the 10 years you've been in it and you realize, wait a minute, I'm actually pretty good at this.
Yeah.
I love what I do. I think Christian higher education in general is, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge wherever you are,
Yeah.
obviously. But even for a smaller private Christian institution, there are definitely issues that we're all working through and struggling with. But I think I got to the point, Bart, where, whether it's friends like you or other vendors, professionals, colleagues, you kind of just get to the point where you love what you do,
Yeah.
and you can't think of doing anything else, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's that, we can't tire with repetition, especially in enrollment management. It's like, okay, here we go. We brought in the class.
Let's do it again.
You report out on those census numbers, and then the next day you're off to get the next class, right? There's never a break. But I think it gets in your blood, your DNA, and you just love what you do, and you become passionate about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned, small Christian college. It's probably more accurate when you started Houston Baptist back in the day when you only had 268, students, but now it's Houston Christian University. Things are changing. You're setting, larger class numbers. I think that, it went from your record classes today. When you look back on that arc, what actually moved the needle? And, because I think a lot of times people assume move the needle one way, but other things are really what moves it. So talk about that, because I know a lot of our listeners are like, oh man, I got to figure out how to get that. And whether they're in marketing, whether they're in enrollment, or even presidents are always trying to figure that out. What have you found kind of the case over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was a silver bullet or a magic pill or a kind of a one size fits all recommendation or solution. Unfortunately, it's probably 100, maybe even 1,000 little things, tweaks. When I came here, the fall right before I got here, it was HBU, Houston Baptist University at the time. It just enrolled 268 freshmen. Our trajectory right now is to enroll over 1,100 freshmen this fall.
Wow.
And that didn't happen overnight.
No.
We did set a goal pretty early on, and we attacked the funnel. If you know me and you've heard me get on my soapbox at conferences and other places, I'm going to talk about the funnel. And we just literally methodically went down the funnel and attacked every stage of the funnel. We attacked every metric, and slowly but surely we got things going from 268 to the, mid 500s. We got to 700 and sustained that for a while. And now we're approaching 1,000 plus. But it is constantly evaluating and making changes to strategies to try to figure out the best way to do it. And it also helps that we're in Houston. I tell colleagues that all the time. You can try this new strategy. This was the result that I had. It worked for me. It helps that I've got 7 point whatever million people right here in my backyard. So your results are going to look different than my results.
Yeah.
But you still have to try. You've got to do something new. You've got to be nimble enough to figure out ways to do maybe even old things better.
Yeah. Well, and shout out to your culture, and you've got an amazing team. I mean, I've met a lot of them, and I had several conversations with several of them this week, and I know that I've been at several conferences with them. And so part of it is culture, and I know that comes from the top down too, and part of it is just helping people understand the direction we're going and getting everybody in the same direction too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I mentioned the kind of the name change, and I know that was about 4 years ago. You guys made that bold identity move to kind of go from Houston Baptist to Houston Christian. That was after 60 years. So take us inside that decision, especially from your perspective in the enrollment and marketing. What were you hoping the new name would do? And 4 years in, what's it actually done? And we talked a little bit about this at conference too.
Yeah. So shout out to Robert Sloan again. When I started talking to Robert Sloan about coming to HBU to be his vice president for enrollment management 20 years ago, even then he was talking about the name Houston Baptist University. What do you think of the name Houston Baptist University? And even then we knew there were some challenges and hurdles to overcome. Yep. More recently, to his credit, whether it was having very confidential but strategic conversations with board members, with alumni, with faculty, staff, it became very apparent that Houston Baptist University, we're still a Baptist university. We're proud of that. That's our heritage. But from a marketing perspective, and I think even you mentioned it, Bart, that, in that one small group meeting that we were in, that this is not a denominationally oriented group of students that we're cultivating, that we're recruiting. And so for us to say we're Baptist or we're this denomination or that denomination, it doesn't always resonate. So what we knew is going from Baptist to Christian was not only more reflective of who we were and are as an institution, but it was really a way to kind of expand our pool, our influence, our reach, really for the next 60 years, as you mentioned. How is it going? We went from that first year, the announcement, that co-branding year where we were HBU, and it was awkward. It was weird. You kind of have to go through that phase. Yep. Our total enrollment actually dipped a little bit. You could say it was flat. I mean, it was 60, 70, off from the prior year. We got that back, by the second year. By the third year, we were cooking with gas. And then this year is going to be another record year. So again, in a lot of ways, it's kind of that flywheel effect. Yeah. You literally stop the flywheel and redo everything. And then to get it going again, that inertia, it just takes a while to build. But then once it gets going, you really start to see the benefits of that. But it is not for the faint of heart. I'm not going to lie. It was a long, arduous process.
Well, and I think that goes back to what you said earlier. There's no silver bullet or magic pill. It's one of those things that anything that you have to do that's intentional, you have to get through that with intentionality, knowing that it's going to be hard. And there's nothing easy. But one thing, speaking of hard, one of the things that you tried to do, that when you did the rebrand relaunch, there was a goal of growing to 10,000 students. Tell me about that, because obviously this fall is strong. You're doing that, but what's going to need to happen both in your enrollment and your marketing to get to that vision that's that ambitious?
Yeah, so that goal was really a goal we set about 5 or 6 years ago, that we wanted to grow to 10,000 with 4,000 traditional in-person, students and about 6,000 online. Sure. And so far we're up at every stage of the funnel, every demographic, but the challenge is now everybody is online. Mm-hmm. And so, it's getting harder, right, to even compete for those online names. There's no major, fully online major out there that we're buying names for that we're not getting outbid by multiple, probably multiples of 10 at this point. Yeah. So it's hard to grow that online population. And we're going to continue to do that. We'll continue to work on that. We're going to break 5,000 total enrollment for the first time ever. So you can say we're halfway there. We're not going to get there by 2030, which was the initial vision. But we're going to get there, and we're going to keep plugging away at it.
Well, and you are in one of the most crowded college towns in America too. And a lot of people were like, well, it's online. You can get everybody. Well, stats show us that most online students are still within a couple hours of the campus.
Exactly. And so we're going to have to go steal market share from somebody else to get there.
That's exactly right. Well, let's shift gear a little bit, because I'm curious about showing up where students actually are. And I know that, and this is probably looking more toward the traditional students, but I know that, Houston Christian put digital billboards inside your local high schools, and I know you're working with NextGrad on that. And where did that idea come from, and what made you willing to try that? Because sometimes those new things that we get pitched, it takes a little guts to get out there and do something new.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was actually at the RNL conference last year, and I'd been talking to Christy Vivian, and if you know Tyler from NextGrad, we had some great conversations. I got to meet Michael there, at the conference. Honestly, what completely pushed me over the edge was the fact that in Texas, starting last year, students could no longer have their mobile phones at school. And it was at that point, because we were already geofencing high schools, right? So in my mind, I'm like, well, we've got that covered, right? But now, if students aren't looking at their phones all day, and we knew they were looking at their phones all day, my teenagers included, now there's this unique opportunity that as they're walking down the halls, as they're going to class, as they're going to lunch, there's this digital billboard now with my ads, scrolling on that digital billboard, and there's no other interference. Right. There's no other distractions. There's no other, screens, if you will, influencing them while they're at school. And it just felt like a no-brainer. It's like, we're gonna do this, and if we're gonna do it, we're gonna go big.
Yeah, I love that, because I think there's just so many opportunities with that, having that billboard in the school where they're at, where they're there every day, they're there 8 hours a day, and even on the during games and things where parents are in the building, those are still running, and I love that too. And I think that's
I've got a picture that I took at my son's high school when we were there for an end of the year banquet. And I'm walking down the hall, and I noticed the digital billboard with my ad on it. So then I had to stand there for 3 to 4 minutes to wait for my ad to come back around so I could get a picture of it.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. So in addition to doing the NextGrad billboards, you've also flipped the traditional funnel with direct admission partnerships with your local districts like Katy and Fort Bend, accepting qualified seniors with a scholarship offer before they even apply.
Right.
What drove that decision and the partnership, and how's that working out for you?
Yeah, so we started Guaranteed Admission Program, which are partnerships based on an MOU and a data sharing agreement with our local school districts. And Katy was one of our first. Fort Bend was one of the others that we partnered with pretty early on, and several others. I think we're in about 12 school districts right now, with another 15 or 20 to go. And so that really stemmed out of the fact that once we started doing direct admit through other sources, it becomes very easy for us to be able to say, congratulations, Bart, based on your 3 whatever GPA, not only are you admissible, but we can guarantee you this XYZ scholarship in the amount of, and if you're interested, just fill out this onboarding form and we'll make it official. Well, what is the onboarding form? It's basically the application, right? So we're just flipping the script. It's a no-brainer. And we're literally, the high schools are literally sharing their data with us. Every senior with a 3.0 or better GPA that we know we can direct admit. And it's worked beautifully thus far. And they only hit my funnel when they fill out the application or the onboarding form, right? So it's not like we're not putting all of them in the funnel. There's a mini ComFlow with about 4 or 5 emails. There's a postcard. If we get a mobile, there's a text message or 2. So it's minimal, right? And once it runs. But that was one of the things that we were trying to promote with these digital billboards with NextGrad, was our GAP program. So we timed it to where when those offers were going out, our ads were scrolling on those digital billboards in all of our GAP high schools. And it worked thus far. It seems to be working very well.
I like that you're segmenting specifically to those schools. I mean, the fact that with NextGrad, you can choose what your ads are for the specific schools, and the idea that you're able to not only advertise to them for those partnerships, but also then have a specific comm flow for them. Because I think one of the challenges a lot of schools have, whether it's direct admit like you're doing or Common App or a lot of things, they throw them in just at the top of the funnel and everybody's in the same place. And that's one of the biggest mistakes of not segmenting down. How did you get that lead? If you got it through a camp versus, an online form versus a digital billboard, you've got to really be smart about that.
Absolutely.
So I love what you guys are doing with that. So I want to get practical here for a second. What kind of creative works for a 15-year-old walking to third period versus what you put on Instagram? Because I'm just thinking about these digital billboards.
Yeah. So and NextGrad coached us up on this too. So the motion ads get their attention as opposed to just a static image, right? So we're not using static images. These are, motion ads that are, I want to say they're approximately like 7 or 8 seconds.
Yeah.
And then they land or resolve kind of on a special URL that was only, utilized for these billboards. I think it was hc.edu/2026. The only place that URL is ever seen anywhere is on that digital billboard. And, in fact, I just checked this morning, we probably drove less than 100 unique visitors to that landing page. But we drove some unique visitors to that landing page, right? There was an RFI form on that landing page that did generate some leads for us. But really the point of those billboards was not only to stay in front of those seniors as they're walking from classes, but as our friend and colleague, Harrison Soup, says frequently, like when else are you going to be able to get in front of, prospective students all the way down to their freshman year, right? I'm not buying freshman names. I'm doing everything I can to buy sophomore, junior names. But I'm not buying freshman names. But now I'm in front of a freshman, which guess what? Now, if I do buy their name as a sophomore or junior and start trying to cultivate a relationship with them, now there's some awareness of our institution, right? So it fits beautifully. And I think that's the thing that I love most about these digital billboards is there's nothing else like this that we're doing. And from an enrollment management perspective, it's hard to talk to a vendor. Very few vendors am I ever going to talk to where I don't already have overlap with something else I'm doing here or over there. This is something that doesn't overlap anything. And so it was a beautiful way to try something new, to pilot it, and really get a good feel for how we're going to be able to potentially use these even more in the future.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that it's a mix of brand awareness and lead generation. There's not a lot of that going on either. I mean, usually on digital, you either have to do one or the other.
Exactly.
But I think these boards do that really well. And so I'm with you. I've had several clients and we've done a lot of creative for them, and you've got to do that motion. You've got to really do it differently. So
well, and I will say too, when we were having our preview day, our visit day, right? So every 2 weeks, we had a different ad that was rotating. Well, the 2 weeks prior to our big Saturday preview days, we had a digital scrolling ad about the preview day, right? Yeah. Because we're already emailing them. We know that high school students are really good about reading their emails, right?
That's right.
But we're already emailing them. We're sending a postcard. We had text reminders, and now we've got a digital ad that, again, we're reinforcing the same message at the right time through different channels.
Love that. So let's talk a little bit about. We're talking about brand awareness. We're talking about just general awareness sometimes, but those channels always get the classic CFO question, what's the ROI? What's that return on the investment? So how do you talk about the value of being seen only before a student ever fills out the inquiry form? Because, I'm sure that has come up, and if it hasn't, it will for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the one of the things that we were able to track this year was the fact that our applications in all of the schools, for the most part, that we're doing our digital ads in the fall, we're up significantly. And so again, it remains to be seen. We've got to close the circuit. We've got to complete the loop and see not only were they legit applications that ultimately were admitted and enrolled, and we'll do that due diligence after census. But we know for a fact that our applications in all the schools that we had those digital ads in this year versus last year were up significantly. Yeah. So again, it's not an easy ROI to capture.
Right.
But at least I'm able to say, definitively, I got more applications, and if I'm getting more applications, then I should be able to quantify and can quantify I've got more admits, and then hopefully we'll be able to see that I've got more enrollees on the back end.
Yeah, and that's why I think those key performance indicators, KPIs, wherever you're at, whether it's digital ads, whether it's your digital spend on Facebook and Meta and Google, whether it's your postcards and your funnel, top of the search tools and stuff, those are really important. And I know that too, we're talking about the funnel and talking about different parts of that. I mean, you mentioned earlier us old timers. I mean, you've been doing this 2 decades. What are most institutions getting wrong at the top of the funnel? Because I know we've talked a lot about, down here at the bottom of the funnel, but what would you tell smaller schools that thinks this kind of presence is out of reach? Because I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, I can't afford those things. And, if you're a bigger school than we are, tell me what you think.
So we've already talked about this. I'm a big funnel guy. So sometimes more is more and sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
And for me, it really comes down to the metrics, right? So from inquiry to applicant, your conversion rate. If I'm adding another 10 to 15,000 inquiries at the top of the funnel, and my conversion, and I'm tanking my conversion rate, well, that's a problem. I probably just added some garbage inquiries. This year, for example, we were up significantly on inquiries at the top of the funnel, and our conversion rate was up year over year. So what I feel really warm and fuzzy about and kind of giddy about is the fact that, okay, so the additional leads that we generated this year versus last year, not only were they solid leads, but we got a greater percentage of them, not only to apply, but my app completion rate was even higher this year versus last year, even with a record number of applications. So I think it doesn't come down to just more is more.
Right.
If you're getting more into the top of the funnel and you're seeing downstream that it's working from a metrics perspective, from, conversion, from completion, from admit, and ultimately yield rates, if all of those are justifying the expenditure, then it was worth it. If not, you pivot and you've got to try something else.
Yeah.
So I think, but I will say, I pulled out this postcard because my son got this postcard in the mail, and it drives me bonkers when my teenagers, college mail arrives and it just sits on the counter. They don't even touch it.
Nope.
They don't care about it. And I'm usually the one, I come home from work, I'm like, hey, buddy, look, you got a postcard. That's kind of cool, huh? And he was like, yeah, in a not really genuine, sincere way. I'm like, hey, but it's got your name on it. You don't think that's, and he was like, but I never talked to that school. I never inquired to that school. So even those kind of things, to be honest, they're a little deflating because that's what we do as enrollment managers and have been doing. I'm 33 years into this thing. I mean, that's what I've done my entire career. But again, authenticity wins, right? So they see through the fact that he didn't inquire to this institution, but they bought his name somewhere, but he's savvy enough to realize that, it's not something that he's necessarily pursuing.
Well, and I think that's so true, because I've got Gen Z students too, and I think mine are a few years older than yours, but it was the same thing. It's like, hey, what do you think of this? Well, Dad, you can just have all that stuff. I know it's your work stuff, so
I bring it to work, right? Exactly.
Exactly right. But I think that it does show you that I mean, all the studies say that personalization makes a big difference.
Right.
But we have to think about the personalization. Slapping somebody's name on the top doesn't count as personalization anymore. And that's some of the nuances that I've learned with having Gen Z kids in my house of what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And so
one-to-one marketing was pretty cool 10 years ago, but
that's exactly right.
It's lost its luster,
That's right. Well, the other thing I wanted to point out before we kind of get to the close is that a lot of what I see you doing, because you talked about, more at the top is not necessarily more, but I think if you're doing the right things like mission fit marketing, I mean, shameless plug, but watering holes are so important. And that's one of the things that I really like about NextGrad too, is that you are in the watering holes where the students are. Yeah. And the more you can be in the watering holes where your students are, using a rifle approach as opposed to a shotgun to everywhere and everything. That's the key.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, that's what we ended up doing in the spring. We have a generous donor who's helped to fund some engineering scholarships for our students, and we've seen a lot of growth in engineering. So where we were promoting our guaranteed admission program in the high schools in the fall, in the spring, we were promoting our Grace Hopper scholarship for engineering majors. Oh. And I was literally going through, spreadsheets after spreadsheet after spreadsheet provided by NextGrad to find schools with high STEM percentages of students, right? So I was literally just combing through data and flagging schools that had a high percentage of quote unquote STEM interest. And that's what we ended up doing our spring advertising campaign around was promoting our engineering programs and this scholarship, right? But I didn't want to just do it everywhere. I wanted to go to these high schools that are right here in our backyard with high STEM affiliated students.
Yeah, and those are going to be the Project Lead the Way places. They're going to be the ones that are really doing that, investing in that. Love that. Great. Well, this has been so much fun, James. I really appreciate this. So for a marketing enrollment leader listening today, what's one step they can take to create better awareness? Maybe have that local partnerships, enrollment. How can they do something better than what they're doing today?
Yeah, I say this often. In fact, I did a presentation earlier this week about being an enrollment innovator. And I think for all of us in enrollment management, it's pretty easy to get comfortable doing what we're doing. We know it works, and we just keep doing the same thing over and over. To grow enrollment, quite frankly, in this day and age with the enrollment cliff, to maintain enrollment, we have to be willing to try new things. We have to take sometimes painstaking and even expensive steps at times to try new things. This was a new initiative for us. I was able to carve out some money to do it, and we're going to carve out a little more money, hopefully this year, to expand it and do even more. But there have also been years where we tried a new thing and it didn't work. Yeah. But we pivot. And so I'm always, every year I'm looking for something new to try to do. And so if I'm, preaching to the choir, great. But for those who are on the fence, or worried or frustrated, I think you have to be willing to try new things. You've got to be an enrollment innovator. And ultimately, I think that's how we move the needle. We've got to do some things different, better, and more efficiently. And hopefully we'll start to see those positive results on the back end.
I love that, James. And one thing I would add to that, because I hear this a lot where people are like, well, I wish I could do that. Well, you have to get creative. And that's where your KPIs are important, because if you're looking at and you're segmenting enough of things, you might be able to pull a little bit of money from your digital ad campaigns. You might be able to pull a little bit from your name buys. There's money out there that might be better deployed for these experiments, as opposed to just saying, I just don't have the money.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
That's great. Well, what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you if they have questions or want to follow up?
You can always, reach out to me directly at jsteen@hc.edu, but just follow me on LinkedIn. I promise if you ping me on LinkedIn and you're not trying to sell me something I don't want, I promise I will respond.
That's right. That's right. Well, James, this has been so much fun. Thanks for taking the time today.
My pleasure.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Higher Ed Marketer. And another huge thanks to our friends at NextGrad for making this summer series possible. I encourage you to listen back through these episodes as there's so much wisdom and gold shared. And be sure to check out NextGrad at nextgrad.com, NextGrad.com, where students see you first. If you found this conversation helpful, please share it with a colleague and join us on LinkedIn at The Higher Ed Marketer. This podcast is powered by Kaler Solutions, your trusted partner in mission fit marketing. Hey, we'll see you next week for another great episode on the Higher Ed Marketer podcast.
The Higher Ed Marketer podcast is proud to be a part of the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast Network. Discover even more conversations, resources, and tools to help you grow your institution at thehigheredmarketer.com, your go-to community for all things higher ed marketing and leadership.